Everyone, welcome. I'm John Park. I'm with the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and I'd like to welcome you to our Love Lesson Lead Town Hall meeting today. I think we have a great town hall scheduled today. Some great people that I think have a great message. I'd like to remind you that on October 29th, 30th, and September 29th, 30th, and October 1st is our annual conference at the Salt Palace. Our first time we can get together in person at the Salt Palace. We're pretty excited about it. We've got a great lineup, including everything from ethics to land use to dealing with growth. It'll be a great lineup. So if you haven't registered, please look that up, and please do. Our guests today will go in this order. First of all, Rod Mann, Mayor of Highland City, and Chief Brian Gwilliam, who's the Chief of the Lone Peak Police Department, will talk to us. They, I think, have a compelling story on communication and how that works. And then we'll turn the time over to Chief Ken Wallentine, West Jordan City. He's their police chief, and I'll introduce Jeanetta in a minute, but when I talked to Jeanetta Williams about what police departments have done the best job of reaching out to the entire underserved community, she mentioned two cities, and it was Salt Lake City and, of course, West Jordan, where Chief Wallentine is the chief of. And so we had to have Chief Wallentine back to our town hall meeting, so we'd like to welcome him, and we'll turn the time over to him in just a minute. And then I'll reintroduce Jeanetta Williams. She's the when her time comes, she's the president of the NAACP Salt Lake City branch and the Tri-State Conference of Idaho, Nevada, and Utah, and also a former member of NAACP National Board of Directors. But first, I'd like to turn the time over to Mayor Rod Mann and Chief Brian Gwilliam.
Thank you, John. I'm going to share a presentation here that is mostly short videos from two meetings that we had last summer that we called them Building a More Inclusive Community. Brian participated in the first one and had a follow-up meeting with one of the participants with his entire police force. But I would just like to walk through some of the excerpts from those meetings. Again, there were two conversations. All the stories that are shared occurred in Utah County. All of them happened within the last 4 years. And I'm providing you the link to the full videos as well. Brian participated, a Highland resident, Hugh, State Representative Brady Brammer and his wife. I was there at both of them. Mayor Troy Stout from Alpine attended one of them. Mayor Mark Johnson from Lehigh attended another. And then we had two couples, one from Lehigh and one from Spanish Fork, who came and visited with us on the second meeting, along with Ronell and his wife, who are Highland residents. So let me just go to the first video. And this is Brandon Bradley. Some of you might recognize him. He was a former defensive back at BYU. He is now part of the football staff, and his wife Alexa was a young ambassador at BYU, and he shares an interesting perspective that I hadn't thought of, and I just listened to it.
Mayor, the sound on the video is not coming through.
Okay, so how do we make that happen? The sound go through. Can you hear it at all?
No. Can you help
Mayor,
us out
you
there,
may
Nick,
have
or-
to you may have to close your sharing and then reshare it. When you do, there's a checkbox down there that it's to include the audio with the video.
Okay.
Exactly. That was, I can't change it.
All right, let me unshare then. How do I unshare? There we go. Pause share, resume share, new share.
You just have, you stop.
Oh, share
stop-
sound. There we go. I see it. Got it. Okay, let's try this again. Sorry, my bad.
And I think it's, as I'm sort of thinking, as a black man, I don't have that luxury to not listen, right? I have to. In order for me to be successful, in order for me to learn, in order for me to grow, in order for me to be in a position to provide for my family, I have to listen, right? Like our experiences as black men and women, like I can't say I'll never talk to a white person again. That's impossible, right? No matter what job, no matter what career I have, I will have to communicate at some point with the white person, right? In that situation, when he was dealing with that guy, I'll never talk to a recruiter, or I'll never talk to the person who had to interview him again. There's no way. There's no way he can get away from that. No way, right? As a parent, there's no way if I have a situation with a principal or a teacher that I don't agree with, and they did something that I felt was racially charged, right? Or it's racially insensitive. There's no way I can tell my kid, you're never going to a school with another white person again. Not that I would ever want to do that, but I don't have that luxury.
You don't have a choice.
You know, I don't have a choice. So as black people, as African Americans, we have to learn to adjust. We have to learn to put our personal bias aside as much as possible, because we know at the end of the day, at some point during the day, I'm going to have to interact with a white person. In a lot of those cases, that white person has power over me, right? My career has power over me, right? The person I work with to purchase my home, right? Like, I can't get away from it, you know? And I think it's something that is often overlooked and not recognized, right? By a lot of people, because we don't have that luxury, right? My world is your world, and I can't get away from you.
Right.
Right?
I'm sorry.
There's no way, right? There's no way. And not, like I said, once again, not that I ever want to, but it's just like a perspective that I think is very often overlooked.
So that was Brandon talking about something I hadn't really considered a lot, was choice. I generally have a choice of who I interact with or what kind of people I interact with. When you're in a minority situation, that is not the case. Next clip is from Ivan Hurd, a Lehigh resident, and he talks about his perspective on how he defines racism.
For me, racism isn't hurting my feelings. Racism is having power that then you usurp over me because of my race. So whether it's a job or police or whatever. So just call me, if I walk out here and somebody calls me a bad word, I'm gonna go home and eat my dinner like I normally would. If I go out here and a policeman of any race decides he has a problem with me, I'm not gonna have that experience, right? So for me, racism means someone is using some power to prevent me, like you said, from having my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And so because, for whatever reason, whether it's because they were the smartest, whether it's because they had a different start, whatever the reason, predominantly white people are in leadership positions. And so as a result, predominantly white people have the ability to have that authoritarian and racist response. Not that black people or Asian people or any other race don't make comments about men or women or your skin or your height or your this or that, but that ability to affect my life, not hurt my feelings, but affect my life, is where it crosses the line for me.
Interesting perspective. Brian and I both like that particular comment. Now here's a couple of stories about kids that were really touching to me, and we just don't realize that it happens today. These both happened within the last few years. One of them right here in Highland.
And then we moved back here about 3.5 years ago. And we were here, when we first moved here, we live over in the Canterbury neighborhood over in Highland. And that 2017, the week of Martin Luther King week, we always as a family will sit down and talk about Martin Luther King. So I remember this experience distinctively. And When you have kids, you start to realize, I can handle what this is, but then I worry about my kids. And my daughter, who was 6 at the time, I remember sitting down with her on a Wednesday and asking her, how was your day? Tell me about your day. What did you experience? And she began to tell me that, during recess, that some kid came over to her and said to her that black people were ugly. And for me as a father, I was just, I was enraged a little bit. I was upset. But then I was also worried because this is my daughter who's very, very I don't care if you're a boy or a girl, you're going to get what's coming to you. So I was a little worried that she might have done something. But she didn't. She turned around and said to this young man, don't judge me by my color, judge me by how I act. And as a father, that made me proud. But the fact, at 6 years old, now we wish she can be that composed with us as her parents, but she's, that's a different story.
That was here in Highland.
That was here in Highland, right, at the elementary school where she goes to. And it was, as a father, you just kind of think about that and think, well, wow, my kids, I have to prepare them. Like their innocence is taken away because I want to believe that they can grow up in an environment where they don't have to face that.
Yeah, as a parent, that would be really hard for me. The next story, I actually had tears in my eyes when she was done. And this is our last video, and then Brian will take over from here.
Sure, because I think like everyone is saying, when you see the understanding of race and experience play out in the very most innocent and, kids who come into this world as beautiful blank slates and then are shaped by all of the influences around them, systemic, cultural, family, community, all of those things, it really becomes revealing about how those forces shape those little souls. And so we have our youngest son who was 6 at the time, and we were going camping. This little boy is blonde-haired and blue-eyed. His father passed away when he was a baby, and I remarried Ivan shortly after that. And so Ivan is the only dad, really, that our son has known. He calls him dad. He absolutely sees him that way. And I had gone in early to the campsite with our kids. We were going to be there for a couple of days before Ivan left work and drove down to meet us. In the neighboring campsite was another small boy who connected with my son, and they became instant best friends. They were glued at the hip for the days that we were there playing together. And I would overhear their conversations, as you do when you're a parent. And on the day that Ivan was coming into town, or into the campground, not town, I guess, the opposite of that, when Ivan was coming into the campground, a few hours before he was there, I heard our son say to his little friend, "There's something I need to tell you about my dad." And his friend said, "Okay." And our son said, "My dad is black, so do you have any questions about that?" And his friend said, "How can he be black if you're white?" And our son said, "Because my other dad, who was white, died when I was a baby, and now my mom married my dad who's coming." And his friend said, "So he's your stepdad?" And our son said, "No, he's just my dad." And then his friend said, "That's cool." And he said, "That's cool." And they started talking about a humongous spider, and on they went. What's heartbreaking to me in that story is that at 6, our son was already aware that there is something about race that people have potential to respond to in a way that doesn't feel positive and doesn't feel safe to him and his family. What's hopeful for me in that story and experience is that at 6, this child is using his power and his voice and his opportunity to educate and share and protect his family.
So to me, that was emotional because I was thinking, gee, if I was that dad, if I was Ivan, how happy I would be that my stepson considers me his father. It does bring up some interesting points about that someone at that young age would have to be thinking about that when he interacts with other kids his age. But I'm really proud of the kid for being so proactive, and I think that bodes well for him in his life, that he's not going to just wait for problems to happen, that he's going to continue on. But I'll let Brian continue on with the conversation here. And
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, League and John, for the invitation to come and just spend a couple minutes with you today to discuss some of the things that we've done here in Highland and some of the things that have personally affected me and changed my perspective, if you will, on race and what it is that we deal with here in Utah and across the country. These experiences that happened last summer, that started with the whole incident that involved George Floyd and everything that happened after that, have changed kind of the way that we as law enforcement leaders have looked on how we include people of color, and how for when I say people of color, I'm trying to be all inclusive here as being a white man in Utah that has grown up here my entire life. I haven't had a lot of interaction with people of color or different ethnicities because it's been predominantly white, and especially in Utah County. My experiences from this last summer have certainly moved me. I call them, I've referred them to something that's moved me off my mark or changed the way that I think about things, and having an opportunity to discuss and have conversations with Renell and other members of the community that have made me think about some of the ways that they have to, when I say they, people of color, have to think about how they go about their day when, as a white man, have never even considered. Things that I would never consider. For example, when I spoke to Renell, he talked about in the morning when he gets up, he has to think about the way that he dresses, about how he's going to present himself throughout the day. For example, he brought up a hoodie. He would never put a hoodie on and pull it up over his head simply because of the perception that portrays. And I'm speaking for him, but I really started thinking about, I had never have to consider what it was that I was going to wear that day. And another thing that really, really hit me was one thing that I like to do, or my wife and I like to do from time to time, is to walk onto new construction sites or walk floor plans and discuss things that we might want to put into a future home of ours. And as I was talking to Renell about this, he told me that he would never, being a black man, he would never consider walking onto a construction site because of the perceptions that he might have. And that officers do show up from time to time when he or some of his friends may have done that. I see some of the people on this call and in the attendees are fellow law enforcement officers or leaders in law enforcement. And I think we can all recall back to our careers when we've been dispatched to a suspicious individual. And when you call and discuss with the caller what it is that's suspicious about the individual, it's because they were black or because the color of their skin made them suspicious. And it's always been frustrating to me as a law enforcement officer that would be the one thing that we get the call about. So those are some of the things that I learned. It's been a real eye-opener for those of us that have been involved, engaging the BIPOC community to see what it is that they deal with that me as a white person don't deal with. And being a leader in law enforcement and being leaders of the community, it's something that we need to consider, and we need to have dialogue, and we need to open up these conversations. I invited Renell to come and spend 2 hours with my entire department, with all of my officers and staff, and discuss a lot of these experiences that he has had and what we can do as law enforcement officers to try and help bridge that gap that lies between persons of color and law enforcement. And it's been a very eye-opening conversation for me and my staff, but but I also think it's been well received, especially in our community. So anyway, I appreciate your time. Again, John, thank you for the invitation, and the league for the invitation. And I'm so looking forward to hearing from Jeanetta. She's I've been in a few Zoom meetings with her, and she's always a delight to hear from.
Thank you.
You're muted, John.
Yeah, there you go. I just like to remind everyone that if they have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll come back to that. You know, I'm those of you that don't know me very well, I am the former city administrator in Highland. And Highland, in a lot of ways, is probably one of the whitest communities that we have. And when Mayor Mann shared via, I think, a rather long letter or email, his experience of what just listening can bring to an organization, and understanding that can bring to an organization. I was truly moved, and I wanted you all to hear that story. And so thank you, Chief Gwilliam and Mayor Mann. Ken Wallentine, time is yours.
Thanks, John. It's I'm flattered to be asked. I feel somewhat at a disadvantage because this is not a topic that I can really speak from any platform of education or expertise. I really can only speak to you about my experience, which now spans 4 decades of law enforcement, and I echo what Chief Williams said about, I'm always nervous when I appear with Ms. Jeanetta Williams, because we've been friends for so very long, many years, and she's always a delight. And I start off by mentioning that because I think one of the challenges that we have in public safety is we get so very busy in the responsibilities that face us that we don't often have time, create time, find time to engage with our community, except when it's comfortable. So the first thing I would say is, if you want to make progress as a police leader in our community today or at any time, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You got to be comfortable with not having to be defensive and not having to own other people's errors, but also very comfortable with owning your own shortcomings and your own ignorance. I will share a brief experience that I hadn't thought about sharing, but Ms. Williams is here. She witnessed this. What she doesn't know is the outcome. So we were in a community meeting quite some time ago, and a man rose up and he spoke with great emotion and some agitation and maybe even a little aggression at some length toward me, and it was uncomfortable. It was really uncomfortable. But out of that discussion grew some trust with a couple of people in the audience that day that have returned again and again to dialogues with me or invited me to dialogues. One of them was a member of our local mosque and has invited me into the mosque a couple of times on special occasions. And it really flows from that willingness to be uncomfortable and to listen to other people, even when they're not speaking in a way that is comfortable, that is praising and kind to you. We've done a few specific things here in our city that I think have been helpful to engage and reach out to community members. We've done some things that I think a number of cities are doing. We've established a community advisory board that's made up of a cross-section of our community, cross-section economically, religiously, really all demographics, racially. And so I get the opportunity to hear directly from people who are invested in the community because they live here in the community. I was a little bit late, and I saw that John sent me a text at 2 minutes to 12 saying, "Where are you?" I was in a meeting because our city diversity committee just kind of popped into the police department today, 8 of them, and wanted to sit down and chat and tell me an experience, and I needed to listen to them, and it was a great opportunity to do some listening. So direct contact with with citizen advisory groups. And I know maybe Ms. Jeanetta will share her experience. I know she served in that role for many years in West Valley. We've organized some other events, one called First Steps to More Trust, which are really listening sessions and experience sharing sessions, much like Mayor Mann, it seems that you had done there in Highland. That kind of storytelling and story listening is very, it's not only validating to those who tell the story, but it helps those of us who may not have the same experiences. We certainly have implemented some training. Again, I think like many departments, we have a training program in our department that is focused on developing and implementing an outward mindset. And it's based on teachings and principles espoused by the Arbinger Institute. And we actually pioneered here in our department with the Arbinger Institute some training to help us be outward thinking in addressing our implicit biases, and that's been very helpful. I could go on and talk about other trainings, but really it comes, those are all important, but really I think at the end of the day it comes down to getting in a room, getting close to people, and those one-on-one contacts. And I encourage police chiefs to do those in whatever form you can. In October, we'll once again participate in National Faith and Blue, a nationwide effort between churches and police departments. And when you get out and you get into those kind of situations, this year we'll be working with a local church that's predominantly comprised of Latinos from Central and South America. And we'll be working on one older woman's yard, doing some yard work and housework for her. Those are the opportunities when you get to stand shoulder to shoulder with people and they get to talk to you one-on-one as a police officer, as a mayor, as a police chief, a city council member, whoever. And that's when I think you see real growth and real strength and really bring power to relationships. I think I often tell my kids and now my grandkids, I don't see the world as it is. I see the world as I am. Take every opportunity every day that you can to get out of how you see the world and get into how other people see the world. And then maybe you'll find out what the world is really all about. But at the very least, you'll see how other people see that. And I try and remember that as I walk into any encounter and any meeting. That's why we've done, autism awareness training in our department. You may not think that has anything to do with relationships with the BIPOC community. It certainly does, because it's teaching our officers to look at the world from someone else's perspective, to see a perspective that is not their own. Much like Chief Gwilliam talked about the advantages that he has from being a white man in that community. Anytime you can get out and see other people's advantages or disadvantages on an individual basis, that's very helpful. When I walk into a meeting, I always try and remember that the courage to sculpt my character, comes from me. It comes from within. If I don't want to be an influence for good, I'm not going to be an influence for good. It's not going to be passive. And sometimes I walk into meetings where I know I'm going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and I'll say a little prayer. I don't think we're going to make any serious progress on what seems to be an intractable problem of relationships among one another, let alone relationships between the public safety community and communities of color, communities of disadvantage. I don't think that we'll ever, as a society, make significant advance if we don't involve the people in the faith community, and if we don't find within ourselves the faith to change ourselves. And I often pause and pray. I said, Lord, please help me to listen with the same intensity with which I want to be heard, and help me to have a heart at peace. And just walk in and dive in, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but sometimes it's comfortable, but it is always worth it. It's always worth it to make. It's always worth it to make the effort to have a heart of peace with your community. And when people see that you have a heart of peace, they're going to want to engage with you. And then all kinds of problems that you think you may have in your community, they suddenly take a back step because they recognize that the police department, the leaders of the police department are trying to do the very best they can to engage in your interests and your needs and your goals and your objectives. And,
let me ask you, I think kind of the difficult question here is,
okay.
Is you've done a great job, and you have organizations that you listen, you have a kind of a structure with your community advisory board and your diversity committee within your city and things like that. But as I understand kind of the Arbinger model and how it relates to this subject, is at the end of the day, you have one officer that appears on one doorstep, and he needs to develop what's called under Arbinger. Now, this is not an advertisement for Arbinger, but an outward mindset toward that person, which means, in my mind, that means that when whoever answers the door, you take them into consideration with what you're trying to accomplish, not just what you're there trying to accomplish. And that to me means that you're consider, ethnicity, all kinds of demographic things, and trying to get to know people and understand what they want. How do you, to me, at the end of the day, that's a very important thing to be able to do. How do you teach that? And to those listening, whether it's police officers or others, how is that getting accomplished on more of the one-on-one basis in your department? And I know there's not a short answer to that, but I'm asking for a short answer.
I'll give you the short answer, John. It is that we are teaching our officers. We practice internally. We remind ourselves, and we say over and over 5 simple words: you matter like I matter. And so when my officer shows up on the doorstep and she has that belief, that core belief, it's not just an attitude, it's a belief that drives the behavior, that you matter like I matter. No matter why you called me here today, or somebody called me here to be with you today, you matter like I matter. And that motivates me to think about, what is this person's challenges and trials and burdens and pains, and how am I as a police officer adding to or can take away those pains, and what am I feeling that I should do for this person? What could I do for help? You matter like I matter as a philosophy drives us forward. It's driven in the last 3 years that I've been chief here at the West River Police Department. We've seen a reduction in use of force that has been significant. It's been profound. That our force rates are just, they're going like this. Now, I don't know all of the reasons behind that, but I think part of the reason is that we are teaching officers to think more about how they impact people, and that often gives us the motivation to take a pause in those situations where force isn't urgently required, and to think of alternatives. But John, the simple answer is to teach people to embrace this concept that you matter like I matter. And all behavior flows from beliefs, right? It just does. And so we try to help our officers have it, and we select officers for the belief in others as individuals, seeing people as, real people, not just objects, not just obstacles, not just someone who will generate a statistic to report.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Chief?
Happy to answer any questions that I'm anxious to hear from Ms. Williams. I know she's anxious to speak.
Great, thank you, Chief. Part of my role as with Utah League of Cities and Towns has been involved in the Loveless and Lead Task Force and this gigantic survey that we did dealing with building trust in our communities with our police departments. And one of the first things we did, one of the first persons that I had the opportunity to be in a Zoom meeting with, I guess, was Jeanetta Williams. And Jeanetta, and immediately I had been in meetings before where Jeanetta was there. She probably doesn't remember me as a city manager, but I just remember thinking Jeanetta Williams is a gift to the state of Utah. And it's something that I truly believe. And as I mentioned earlier, Jeanetta is the president of the NAACP, the Salt Lake branch and Tri-State Conference of Idaho, Nevada, and Utah. She's a former member of the NAACP National Board of Directors. And I just asked her to come and give us her thoughts on some of the things we're trying to build in our communities. And with that, I'll turn the time over to you, Jeanetta. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, John, and thank you for those very kind words, and also to Chief Williams and Chief Wallentine. And yes, as Chief Wallentine had said before, we have known each other for many, many, many years. In fact, I knew his children when they were little ones running around, and now they have children. So that's how long we've known each other. It's been a long time. We've had a great working relationship throughout the years, and with some other police departments here as well. Some of the ones I don't have your cell phone numbers, but anytime that there's things going on, I have several of the police chiefs' cell phone numbers that even if it's after hours, they'll always take my call, which I'm really appreciative of. I want to be able to work with the police departments in all areas. I work with the fraternal order police. A lot of times I know that people say, well, the NAACP, why does the NAACP working together with law enforcement? Well, we're not enemies, and we must work together. We're going to accomplish anything, then we're going to work together. Unlike a lot of other cities that I have seen that don't work with police departments, they don't have the progress that we have here. In fact, the diversity boards, the advisory boards, the citizens police review boards that some have had, as West Valley, for instance, the chief, I have known her for many years as well, but I served on the citizens review board there, standards review board for 20 years. And one of the reasons why I even started to serve on that was because there were things that was happening in West Valley, and I was always making complaints or going down to the station, complaining about some issues that was going on. And after a number of those complaints, then the former chief and mayor had said, I think you might like or appreciate serving on our review board, citizens review board. So you can kind of see some of the things that's going on. And so I did do that, and it was very good. But I commend everybody that's trying to put together a review board of some sort, a diversity board, advisory board. And I know that South Salt Lake is putting together one as well. So whatever that I can do to help in those efforts, we appreciate it. Some of the ways that I think that beneficial for the police and the communities of color to work together is for accountability and transparency. When folks are seeing that there might be a shooting or there could be anything going, a robbery in the area or anything that's going on, it's good to let the community know what's going on, why you're releasing the information, but then also say, we are prohibited right at this time. This is all the information that we are allowed that we can, share with the public. But as soon as we are able to share more information, then we will do that. And I think it puts a sort of comfort to the community saying, oh, okay, this is what's going on. When they have more information, they will let us know. And then they go to bed and feel, assured that that's what's going to happen. But I think too that the presence of police within the communities when there's different events going on, the shop with the cop or anything like those type of things, playing basketball, playing games. I know I posted a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember what it was, but it was an event in the park going on and they were playing music and this one police officer, he was in uniform, and he joined this line dance with the other police officers. And he was having a good time. It was fun to see him feel comfortable enough that he can do that line dance and join the folks, and just different things like that, which some people may think, oh, that's no big deal. But anytime that I can see the police departments and law enforcement joining to not look at things and say, we're being critical or we're overlooking, we're seeing what's going on. We're going to make sure that people stay peaceful, things of that sort. But I think the accountability is one thing that people can do and work together. And another thing I think for the police department is to, make sure that you have and you address diversity within your department. Because as Chief Williams has said, growing up in an area where there's mostly all white, you never see a person of color. And then all of a sudden your first interaction with the person of color is when you've called out on a domestic abuse or something like that. And as I know those are cases where are very dangerous to police officers. And I really like having the ability to work with more social workers, to have social workers be able to help to address in those areas. So I think the more that we can even have our police officers trained and working on those type of issues. And as Chief Wallentine said about the autism, there's cases that they can look at, for instance, brain injury. I know I did some training years ago with police department, and I think it was the West Valley Police Department on the brain injury. So just different things that's going on. And now there's so much talk on mental illness as well. So, we know there's a lot of burden put on police officers, but then a lot of burden is put onto the community as well when we're looking at different ways that we can work together and we can try to resolve, the different issues. And I think the only way that we can resolve those issues is for folks coming together and working together and not having everything as a confrontation that we see. Because working with legislators, being able to, after Judge Floyd murder, being able to work with law enforcement, being able to work with legislators and community to get so many of the different bills passed. And sure, there was some more that we're going to be working on, for instance, the no-knock warrants. Some of the departments are already addressing those issues, and some of the police departments were already addressing the no-choke hold going on. And so we have all of these different things that we can continue to work together. And I think one of the best things to do is try to make sure that, when there's different things going on in the community, maybe it's up to the community, we can reach out to the police departments and just let them know this event is going on, because the police departments don't always know when things are going on, and then just invite them to be a part of it, or to have a presence there, or to introduce the police departments to the community. And I think those are some of the things that we can do to work together. Those are just some of the things that I was looking at. Diversity training within the police departments is essential to do. And you don't have to do it like every day, but being able to let folks know that this is some of the diversity training. This is what we talk about when we talk about explicit biases. These are the things that we don't want to see our police officers do. And I think it just to reiterate from the top down to the officers would be beneficial. So that's part of the things I guess that I was looking at, and able to reduce the biases, that are going on that we see so often. and just continue to work together. I know several years ago, we have a Dr. King luncheon every year, and I brought it to our executive committee about recognizing first responders. And so in January every year, before January, we start getting nominations in, and we recognize first responders. And I think, and we've had very good responses to that effort as well. So I just think that it's incumbent upon the community as well as the police departments to work together. So we can't just, the community say, put everything on the police departments, that it's up to them to do everything. Well, it's up to the community as well to be able to help. And that's one of the things that what I would like to say is that, you know, with everybody working together, we can achieve great things. And I'm open up for any questions or anything else, or if there's something that I didn't talk on, feel free to ask me to talk about that. If there's some volunteer opportunities, you know, within the police departments, where people can come in and see what's going on a day-to-day basis, that would be beneficial as well.
Can I ask one question, Jeanetta? As I know that, I mean, what we've heard from you and what we've heard from, well, all of our presenters today is that there are different, not only different communities, but different individuals within communities that we need to be able to, I mean, there are constituents we need to be able to reach out to them. And it was interesting to me that you mentioned, you know, that you're Martin Luther King, get together every January, you reach out to first responders. How do we reach organizations or underserved communities when they really don't have a kind of a formal organization that we can reach out to? I think we see that a lot, and I think we probably see that. You know, I think we see that a lot, especially with some of our Latinx communities. Do you have any suggestions on how we can reach out to all those kind of communities?
I think maybe the best way that, you know, that I could suggest, if they don't have an organization, you know, like the NAACP, we can help in organizing different meetings with other groups as well. So it's not just the African American communities. You know, we work with other communities, and the NAACP, we're always happy to try to help bridge those gaps and try to form some working relationships through, you know, putting together some meetings, putting together information, being able to post or reach out to those other communities. For instance, when there was a lot of hate crimes going on with the Asian community, the NAACP, we reached out and we were, you know, saying, you know, no more hate, stop the hate to Asian communities. When we saw different negative things, you know, being posted, then we would make sure that we were addressing those issues. And so there's a lot of times that we can work together.
Chief Wallentine, you have a thought on that?
Yeah, it's a bit like if you got a child getting married, you know, you sit down, they sit down, you sit down, and then you come up with this list of people to invite. Well, you think about people that are important to you. You think about people that are your friends. You think about people that you value, and you know they value them. It's the same kind of thing. And this is not the easy answer, but you've got to make the investment in the relationship first to find out about those events. Now, Ms. Williams didn't toss this out, but I'll tell you one thing you could do is you could become a member of the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
You hear all kinds of things, isn't that right?
That's right. Absolutely.
You know, but that would be one way. But you know, I'll give you an example. I got an invitation to an event last Friday night at one of our churches. I do this often. Took my wife because she's the fluent Spanish speaker of this particular congregation, predominantly Spanish speaking. And they thought about inviting me to their event simply because they've seen me show up. And I'll tell you, police chiefs, I don't know if we have police chiefs other than Chief Gwilliam on the scene here, but you know, in many of our communities, the churches are the place where you get those connections, invitations. I tell my officers, I invite my supervisor, go to church. First off, some of you people really do need to be in church, and you're going to be you need to get right with God, and then you're not gonna have to worry about getting right with the chief, right? But you know, I've done this. You show up in uniform at a church service on Sunday, I guarantee you walk away with new friends. I guarantee it. And those friends, John, they will invite you, and it may be the wedding reception, but they will invite you to the events in your community because you've just said to them, you didn't never say a word. Walking in the door, you said, you are important to me. I'm here to serve you. I respect your community. I value you, and I share. For me, I'm pretty open about this. I share a profession of faith with you. That'll generate the invitations, and Ms. Williams and I can give you some churches to show up at if you want. Hey.
Exactly. Well, I totally agree with you on that one as well too, because so often, you know, people, you know, just like I think you had said, or maybe Chief Williams before, about being in uncomfortable positions. And when you first walk in, you may feel uncomfortable, but by the time you walk out, you feel very comfortable because people are going to greet you. They're going to thank you for being there. They feel that you're being there because you want to be there. You're, you know, showing up on a Sunday morning, and a lot of times people, you know, just don't, you know, really come up to a police officer for some reason. But I think you would see more people coming and greeting you more so than people not. So I think that's an excellent idea. And yes, NAACP membership is open. Anybody that would like to take a membership out, feel free to do that. Memberships start at $30 a year. And so, but you can build up and become life members too. Right? Yes, there's this card.
There you go. So, and I know Chief Wallentine is a life member, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I appreciate that.
Very proud.
You know, and I think one of the important aspects of what Chief Wallentine just said, but I'm going to go back to a discussion that Chief Gwilliam and I had after the meetings that Mayor Mann showed us some videos of, and we had a discussion about when someone shows up, when a police officer shows up, to me, being a white male, okay, that obviously had a city manager, so I know police people. It gives me comfort, but a lot of groups, it doesn't give them comfort when, you know, that their perception when a police officer shows up is different than what my perception was. Probably didn't get the comfort, and I think that what Chief Wallentine is just saying. Do you want to, before I continue, you want to comment on that, Chief Gwilliam?
No, I think you're hitting it right on the head. When, for some communities, when an officer shows up, there's a defense mechanism that kicks in, as opposed to some other that welcome law enforcement to come in. Others don't want law enforcement to be there. They don't want law enforcement to be there to handle the problem because their experience has been things escalate and get worse when law enforcement shows up, as opposed to a problem being solved.
Yeah, and so it goes, now it goes back to, I think, what Chief Wallentine just said, is when we're not showing up in situations that are, there's conflict, if we're showing up to not only churches, but community gatherings, just to say hello and say you're there and get offered, picnic food or whatever it is. Those are the kind of things that are needed, because that conflict and that feeling about the uniform is different to different people. And we have to think about that, I think, a little more. Is that kind of where you're going, Chief Wallentine, with that?
Yeah, it really is. It's about showing up. Obviously, if you wear a uniform, you're obviously a police officer. But you're showing up with an open heart, and it becomes so evident so quickly. And Ms. Williams is right. I promise you. I've done this in Baptist churches and Catholic churches, and a couple of Pentecostal and a number of churches in my community, and our mosque. I will tell you, to any church people listening today, you're going to have to work pretty hard to feed me more and feed me better than our Islamic community. But I promise you, people will come up to you, and there may be a nanosecond of discomfort, but the graciousness with which you are met, and the grace that you return will pay dividends beyond your imagination. And if nothing else, and then Ms. Williams, I think, gave an example of this. She's had that experience of having a situation in my community that wasn't really great, and she called me on the phone and said, "Look, we got a little bit of a problem." I would much rather hear from Ms. Jeanetta Williams than I would from a news reporter, and I would much rather hear. So I had a call from a pastor last week of a church in my community. I would so much rather hear from that pastor about a youth that had a negative perception about an encounter with one of my officers at the high school than I would the high school principal or anyone else. I mean, it's just good politics, right? I run for election every other Wednesday night, and Chief Gwilliam is smiling because he's like, "Yeah, and your mayor's online too, brother." But more significantly, John, when that happens, we can dial right into the situation, and we can engage it, and where appropriate, we can fix it. We can apologize. We can move forward. And I see Ms. Williams on her head. I will tell you this experience too. When we own it, when we step into a problem, lean into a problem, the community members will support you because they know you're not perfect. They know you're trying to do the mission thing. So go to church, John.
Okay, I have to give up golf or something, I guess, to do that. But we'll see what happens. Really, that's all I think we have. But I'd just like to ask Jeanetta if she has any closing thoughts, and then we'll go.
Well, I think my closing thoughts would be just like what Chief Wallentine just said. Same thing as when I met with all of the superintendents of the education, was that I told them that I would much rather have them call me if they're uncertain on any different issue and ask me before the media gets to them. And I want to be able to talk to the chief of police, the managers or city managers or anybody, just give me a telephone call, send me an email, and let's talk about the issue first before it does reach the media and before people are critiquing exactly what happened. So I think that's really good. It's not saying that we don't want the media to be able to report it, but it's just saying that let's try to resolve the issue before it gets to the media in different cases. And so I think that's always good.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Williams, for your participation today. And Chief Ken Wallentine, Chief Brian Gwilliam, and Mayor Rod Mann, who told me he is not running again this election. He will truly be missed in the city of Highland. Thanks you all for attending. I'll remind you that the recording of this will be available on the Utah League of Cities and Towns website. And Mayor Mann sent in the chat box, put the links to not only the little video clips that he showed us today, but also a link to both the entire 2 meetings that he referred to, and we'll make those available as well. And so thank you again for tuning in, and enjoy. Have a great week.